When I was in school, me and my friends had a routine. After our last class, we'd walk to McDonald's. We did this a lot, almost every day. Some of my friends lived nearby, so it worked out well. If we got tired of walking or visiting other shops, we'd go to a friend's house. We'd hang out there until his mom came home from work. His mom was usually okay with a few of us being there, but not too many. I guess it was because their house was small. We weren't bad kids, but we did some not-so-great stuff. Looking back, I wish we'd taken our health more seriously. I used to smoke a lot, but it's just not for me anymore. One day, like usual, we went to McDonald's after school. It was quiet, which was weird. There was hardly anyone there except us. We got excited and started being loud. Then, this man came over to us. He looked old and kinda scary. He said his name was Lincoln, and then one of my friend Mike started laughing. Lincoln got mad, and suddenly we weren't laughing anymore. It turned out later that he didn't even work there. He'd been fired for trying to hurt someone over a wrong order. It was scary to think we'd been making fun of him. After that, we stopped going to that McDonald's. We heard Lincoln kept coming back, causing trouble. It made us sad. We wished he could get the help he needed. But the story didn't end there. One day, we were walking home from school, and we noticed him hanging around that McDonald's again. We tried to ignore him and walked past quickly. But then, he started following us. We picked up our pace, but he kept getting closer. We didn't know what to do. Finally, Mike spoke up. He said we should split up and go different ways to confuse him. So we did. I went one way, Tyler went another, and so on. I was scared, but I tried to act brave. I kept looking over my shoulder to see if Lincoln was still following me. After what felt like forever, I made it home safely. I was so relieved. But then I started worrying about my friends. What if he had caught up with them? I called Tyler first. Luckily, he answered right away. He said he'd lost the man in a crowd of people. I felt a rush of relief. But then I remembered Mike and Ethan. I tried calling them, but neither of them picked up. I started to panic. What if something had happened to them? I told my mom what was going on, and she called the police. They said they'd send someone to check on Mike and Ethan. It felt like hours passed before we heard anything. Finally, the phone rang. It was the police. They said they'd found the safe. They'd gotten lost trying to find their way home, but they were okay. I let out a sigh of relief. I was so grateful that everyone was safe. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the fear that had gripped me when Lincoln had been following us. After that day, we avoided that McDonald's altogether. We didn't want to risk running into him again. Instead, we started going to Taco Bell or Subway after school. It wasn't the same, but at least we felt safer. As time passed, I couldn't stop thinking about Lincoln. What had driven him to act the way he did? Why couldn't he just leave us alone? I wished there was something I could do to help him. This incident happened in the early 2000s at McDonald's when my mom was pregnant with me. I've heard about this story before, but it wasn't until recently that my mother told me more details about it. It was a time of financial instability for my mom, as she struggled with bills, rent, and the ever-increasing cost of food. Faced with high prices at the supermarkets, she often went to fast food places to save a few dollars. One evening, after meeting with an old friend from college, she decided to grab something to eat on the way home. It was late, about 10 o'clock, and options were limited. McDonald's was one of the few places still open, so she decided to make her way there. As she entered, she noticed a man sitting alone at one of the tables, dressed in a dark jacket, his head lowered, and only an empty beverage cup in front of him. My mom decided not to interrupt, ordered her food, and sat down at a neighboring table to eat. Then she had the feeling that someone was watching her. The man's stare felt exceptionally intense and made her uncomfortable. Nevertheless, she tried to ignore him and concentrated on her food. As a charming woman, my mother was used to attention. But this was something else. Soon enough, the man got up and approached her table. He politely asked if she could spare some change for a drink. Despite her financial situation, my mom's kindness forced her to help. She reached to her purse and handed him a few dollars. After getting his drink, the man left the restaurant, leaving my mom with a sense of relief. She finished her meal and headed back to her car, unaware of what was awaiting her. As she started the engine, she was startled by a tap on her window. 2 police officers stood outside, asking if she had seen a man in a dark jacket. Confused at first, my mom recalled the man from the restaurant. The officers confirmed that he was a wanted criminal, accused of a serious crime. Mom's heart raced as she realized the seriousness of the situation. She gave the officers all the information she could remember in the hope that they would help catch him. But as she drove home, she couldn't distract her thoughts from the fact that she had met a criminal without even realizing it. Years passed and the memory of that fateful night stayed with my mom. She often told me the story and highlighted how important it was to be alert and careful in unknown situations. As for the wanted criminal, my mom never found out if he was caught. But the experience left a lasting impression on her and was a sobering reminder of the unpredictability of life. If you want to see more stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe. Now, let's continue with the third story. For a couple of months, I used to work at our local McDonald's. One day, I got stuck with the night shift. I wasn't too happy about it, but I needed the extra cash, so I accepted it and headed in. It was around midnight when things started to get weird. The restaurant was empty except for me and the manager, who was doing the paperwork in the office. I was busy at the drive-thru, trying to stay awake while handing out Big Macs and fries to the random stragglers. That's when I heard a soft tapping sound coming from the drive-thru window. At first, I thought it was just the wind or something, but then it got louder, more insistent, like someone was tapping their fingernails against the glass. I leaned forward and peered out into the darkness, but I couldn't see anything. The tapping continued, growing louder and more frantic by the second. I realized that whatever was out there, it wasn't going away. Suddenly, the tapping stopped, and there was complete silence. I sat there, frozen, waiting for something to happen. And then, without a warning, the drive-thru window flew open and sent cold air into the restaurant. I stumbled backwards as I stared into the darkness. And that's when I saw a pair of bright eyes staring at me from the shadows. I blinked, thinking maybe it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But when I looked again, the eyes were still there, shining like beacons in the night. Without thinking, I slammed the window shut and locked it, my hands shaking as I stepped back. Then I immediately went to the manager, but the office door was closed, and there was no sign of movement inside. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, listening to the sound of my own breaths as they resonated in the empty restaurant. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the eyes disappeared as if they had never been there. I let out a shaky breath, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. The rest of the night and morning passed without other incidents. I know I have to tell someone about what I had seen, but who would believe me? Never in my life have I experienced anything so odd and horrifying. I will never forget those eyes, but I will do everything in my power to never have to work in a fast food restaurant again.